Hello, I am David Clover. My Earth name is Clover, and I live in Nyack, New York, which is actually the name of a tribe that was here, Nyack. But there's also been the Lenape people and the Munsee people in this area. When I hear the word positive masculinity or that term, I think of what I consider what is positive. And I would just going to say my definition of positives, what serves life. And so I would say just life-serving masculinity, to get away from good and bad, evil versus not evil, that kind of thing, that kind of dualistic way of thinking. I still like the word positive masculinity. What would be life-serving? I think, first of all, it's a recognition of what is male privilege, and to understand the power structures that have been passed down through time to men. And those are essentially cultural institutions like religion, economic opportunities, academia, voting, athletics, judicial system, the armed forces, emergency services. I listed off about 7 there, but you could go through each one of those and really understand how certain stories and certain understandings, assumptions from those institutions have just led from one thing to the next, until we've gotten to this point, 2023. But if you start seeking this knowledge, it will come, as far as understanding what male privilege is and sort of unpacking that backpack, that invisible backpack that men get when they come into this world, just by virtue of being male-bodied. Who are the people with less of a voice, or sometimes no voice, in this world? And also, not just people, the living beings that don't have human bodies and don't actually have a human voice. They're as much people as anyone else. So these aggressions, these levels of violence can be macro or they can be micro, even to the scale of microaggressions. The way we have everyday speech patterns or assumptions, like, for example, dominating a conversation, or talking loudly, or more often than other people, or just assuming that my opinion is going to matter more because I'm more of an expert or something. This is the kind of thing that a man might assume. It seems to me that this understanding that men as a whole, they might feel like they're losing something, and they might be defensive to some of the changes that are happening in today's world. We have so much to be grateful for every day. Maybe it's being way out of practice with giving thanks. And every day we have to consume plants, animals, funguses, bacteria. That's all part of us. We wouldn't be anything without the bacteria in our gut. We wouldn't be anything without the life force of the food we ate this morning, whether it's the wheat or the egg from the chicken spirit, or whatever it is, really, the potato. You could go on and on with all the foods that we're eating every day. Life is pretty amazing. It doesn't take long to step outside and breathe in the air and appreciate all the beauty that is just right around us. That life does feed on life. It is beautiful to give thanks. There's so much to be in love with. There's so much beauty right there, right outside, waiting for us to just go to it. I guess in a lot of ways, that's a first step. That's a simple first step. I invite men to hang out with each other and be their authentic selves and show what they're really thinking about. Because in that way, I think we get to learn, other than just being stuck, right? Because just doing the same thing over and over is just going to lead to more stuckness and frustration and pain, really. So in order to move on from that, we need to do something differently. We need to start thinking outside the box. And as Einstein said, we can't solve today's problems with the same thinking that created them. A lot of men like to think of themselves as being a protector. I like the idea of peaceful warrior. That is someone who is vigilant and realizes that the stakes are high, but also does not go to violence to solve everything. That's really the most peaceful way, is to think about how talking out the solution, at least at first, is really the best way. A whole field of study of how people can understand each other better. What is empathy, and how does that work? What is making a request, right? So there are all these different ways of communicating in a more life-serving way.
In the realm where the energies of the universe converge, masculinity stands as a radiant force, pure and divine, akin to the golden rays of a million suns. It is not confined to gender, but within every soul, male or female, there exists the potential for good and the capacity to choose a path less virtuous. When disorder is introduced through the free will of a soul, it can deviate from its noble path. The once hungry and active nature of the mental light can transform into something psychopathic and diseased, straying from the true identity of the king or masculinity. The potent and nurturing light can degenerate into toxic waste, far removed from its intended purpose as a source of healing. Yet hope shines like a beacon on the horizon of the soul. Through the alchemy of inner transformation, the disordered psychopathic waste can be transmuted into the spiritual gold of the sun. This is the essence of the mystic's journey, the transformation of base elements into the noblest of substance. The alchemist's path is not for the faint of heart, for it demands discipline, introspection, and a relentless commitment to inner nobility. Many may lay claims to the title of king, but true nobility lies not in words alone, but in the actions and intentions. The alchemist, like the dragon, holds the power to turn lead into gold, not through external riches, but through the enrichment of the soul. In this sacred alchemical journey, disorder is but a temporary detour, a challenge to be met with resilience and inner strength. The solar king, in all his glory, emerges from the crucible of transformation, a symbol of masculinity at its noblest. So let us not be led astray by empty proclamations of kingship, but instead embark on the profound journey of inner alchemy. For within each of us lies the potential to transmute disorder into divine radiance, to awaken the solar king, and to walk with nobility, authority, and purpose. Ashe.
It's wonderful to see you all. I'm speaking to you from the blessed heart of the Sonoran Desert, from the unceded lands of the Tohono O'odham, Akamil O'odham, and the Yaqui people. My name's David Edward, Astral Catman. It's my spirit name. And I specialize here in animist pastoral counseling, animist ministership, and especially with the intersection with Jungian psychology and mythology. And I'm really honored to be a shepherd of this subject, really, for all of y'all today. I'm called to really just at the outset of this say how heavy my heart is for all the suffering that's happened based on the patriarchy, based on toxic masculinity, to all the women and to the men who have suffered so deeply from that. And I hope through our spiritual practice, we can begin to heal that collectively and in our own lives. I feel like positive masculinity and men's work, which is really where I'm coming from today, let's talk about men's work. I feel like men's work is one of the biggest things we can do to try and right some of these wrongs. So I just passed this subject on, positive masculinity, healthy masculinity, masculinity and its divinity, to some awesome ministers, and they sent back their thoughts, or I interviewed with them, and we put them together in this montage. So I really hope you enjoy it. I know you'll get a lot out of their sharing, and thanks y'all for your support. I really appreciate it.
I would begin by saying that to me, animism, and specifically the practice that I participate in, full circle animism, is the awareness that everything, all things, have the power to embody spirit voice. There is a noticeable synchronicity sometimes that draws the attention to a natural feature, a tree, a rock, an empty chair, a bowl of food, that there could be a beginning of the opening of a portal of communication that will generate information that's pertinent to each person's life. And it's a matter of developing a skill to determine what voices a person chooses to listen to. That there's many voices out there. There's many potentials to open up a conversation. But the feeling, the sense of the spirit is, which conversations do I want to have? As a male, a man, the thing that strikes me is that it's true, regardless of orientation, is that listening is a skill. Listening is probably the most basic animist skill. And so whoever is involved in a conversation has to be listened to. And we all know different types of listening, of holding back the stream of consciousness of our own questions and being fully present when another being speaks. And for me, the more proficient I become in listening and being present fully while I'm listening, an active listener, then the stronger the validation and my allegiance to the process of wanting to know more. And so now, talking about positive masculinity, I understand that from the general, it comes down to the specific of me, a male who's beginning his 69th year of life, and that I have a long history. And this history is based in patriarchy. And patriarchy, in my opinion, is the way of the warlord. That to understand patriarchy is to understand the war force. And as a male, to be aware of how this inclination, maybe it's a sleeping tendency, can be activated by other males into acknowledging the war force as excitement, as motivation. And through this war force, to become narcissistic and possessive, which leads to the patriarchy of oppression, which is so obvious in the role of women in many cultures of the world. So I would say to confront these tendencies that I feel in myself as a conditioned, almost 7-decade participant in the patriarchy, that there's a lot that I need to listen for, cues about hints, clues of if my behavior is becoming patriarchal. And it's a constant struggle. And words are always changing. Many of the questions that are being asked today didn't even exist when I was, younger. The Me Too movement had occurred. There was just a whole lot of denial. And now it's thankfully out in the open. And it's something that we could talk about. And so as the words change over time, it's obvious that a person, an older person, could blunder into using words that aren't consistent with the new understandings. And whenever anything happens, that's a misunderstanding. Part of my listening practice is to immediately apologize, and find out, are there questions of clarification that, that I could be more aware of? So I guess I'm really hoping that my positivity doesn't become a toxicity, because right now there seems to be a lot of discussion about toxic positivity. And so I don't want to be a toxic positivity masculine example.
Always interesting to me how, as human beings, we have these words that we use and throw around, but we really don't have the best articulate way to describe what they mean. I think about that, like, what does it mean to be a man or a woman or whatever in between experience you're having? What defines masculinity? And I think for my generation and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself, I was born in the mid 60s. And so, not that I was around in the 60s that I remember, but with feminism and equality and equal rights, there was always this layer of honoring women and divine feminine, and even into the 80s and 90s and the hippie movements of divine feminine and men really embracing their feminine. We never really focused on developing the masculine in a positive way. It was always just tampering the toxic masculinity, not enhancing the positive. And so I've been thinking about that this week, like, what is masculinity? And I mean, women, I know masculine women that are very feminine and masculine, and I don't know how to describe it, but it's a tough terminology, because what makes a person masculine or a male? Is it just your genitalia? Is it your testosterone levels? What is that? And so I've always, this belief system is open to change, but I've always had this definition in my mind that the masculine was the precursor to creativity, and then the feminine side was more the creativity, and the masculine was more like the raw materials to get to the creative process. But that may not be true anymore. I don't know what I'm thinking, but I've just been really focusing on ways to stand up, because I do identify as male, and I do identify as the masculine part of our human spectrum. And I think it's important to stand up and focus on the aspects of not calling people out when you see the toxic masculine, but I heard a new term this week called calling them in, where you're actually just sitting with that and talking about what that makes you feel like. I'm starting to see a simultaneous growth happening in our culture for this exact topic of positive masculine development. I see a lot of organizations evolving or coming into play or coming into being, and I see even on a place as horrible as Facebook, I see people chiming in that are strangers, chiming in support, and I'm trying to do that too. Instead of being a negative or it's good to voice your opinion in a neutral way that doesn't cause a trigger for the people that you're opposing or you're trying to talk with. There's a neutral way I think that's what positive masculinity is to me, is approaching things in a neutral way that doesn't trigger either side or doesn't trigger people into feeling offensive, but to be supportive of others in a way that leads them into a more positive aspect of supporting others. Yeah, I've had, my grandfathers were both almost engineers in a way. They were not high school educated even, but they had workshops and they're always building things and creating, things and tinkering around with tools. But they were not very great at expressing themselves. They're very quiet and they didn't have that communication. I think that's what's really needing with the positive masculine is the communication and being able to express yourself and your feelings and what you're experiencing so that it's understood, and also to be there to be able to communicate for other people and be intuitive and aware of their needs as well.
That's where I think being a veteran has definitely helped with that aspect of it, learning how to work through some toxic masculine type workplaces and be able to come out on that without picking up a lot of those traits and just kind of seeing them as to what they are, really taught me how to maneuver myself in the world, because I can see I didn't like that. Those people didn't like that. I think non-toxic masculinity is being a strong person with a good sense of how other people feel about it. Just being a strong person and a strong presence in someone's life, that male presence, you know. Yes, I'm here to care for you, but I'm also here to love you, you know. And that's something also dealing with my stepchildren, teaching them good lessons, you know, being that good example of how to be a strong person without hurting people, how to be a strong presence without being intimidating. And that was something as someone that is 6'4", 220 pounds, I never realized when I was in that police uniform, somebody would say something to me, and I'm a, you know me, I'm a happy type smile guy, right? And you know, they're, oh, you're intimidating. I'm like, it never occurred to me that me, little old me, was intimidating to someone. But then I stepped back and looked at myself in my uniform, like, okay, I'm not as small as I thought. So, you know, it was, you know, kind of keeping your humility, I think, is something that's big with that too. You know, I never really thought of myself as a big, tough guy, but then my life experiences has shown me, okay, I'm a little tougher than what I thought. You know, after going through all the things that I've went through, but never coming out with like some super ego on the other side of it. You know, keep yourself kind of level and humble helps with keeping that toxicity out of your life. You know, the animist type journeys that I've had was being and experiencing being a lion. We think of animals as a lot different than what they are. And, you know, that's where, you see these videos of like a lion or a lioness taking this little antelope or something and protecting it instead of eating it. I've seen a few of those videos of little things like that happening. And so, you know, it's out there. It's not just within us, it's within the animal kingdom. And when you see animals and learn animals, yes, they're pretty tough, but then they have different sides of it. With having chickens, you know, that's another one. You know, we've lost our rooster, so I've seen how the chickens act so differently now that he's gone, and it's kind of weird. They kind of look to me and act like I'm the rooster now, because they depend on me to do their food and everything. We had a really good rooster. He would point to food and make noise. Hey, something's over here. He was a really good guy. So these girls now, they're just lost. And it's really weird to see how he handled the flock. Well, we had new boys come in after he got taken out by an owl or hawk in the backyard. And these new guys didn't have him as that example. And so I would put the feed out, and we had 4 or 5 of those new little roosters. They would run and just eat the food. And we were like, no, you know, let the girls eat too. And they wouldn't do it. It just, they had no example of how to be that strong masculine rooster and still be like nice. You know, through the animal kingdom and being a part of the animist community, you can pick up on these things. You can see, you know, how to kind of run your life. So it's like, that's one of the things that I love about the farming aspect of my life, has been that connection that I've been able to make out here. with the wildlife and my domesticated livestock and everything, and seeing that, hey, toxic masculinity is bad, and the animals even get it.
Well, I'm Stephen, psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, also Animist minister. Well, and not even trying to throw parents under the bus or anything, but just not even having like a positive role model for healthy masculinity in my own home. But then when you look out into society, you see that just kind of exemplified everywhere. For me personally, it was looking at kind of the patterns in society, because even on a grand patriarchal example, we see most of our leaders are single males, and oftentimes, not to diagnose, but there's usually some personality disorder type stuff in there, and we're solving all our problems, all our world's problems with violence. And then it's almost like growing up in a dysfunctional household where you have even the leaders of our country sometimes are a lot of separation and division in our society, and that's kind of often fueled. We're almost like putting siblings against siblings in the same home, and that's where, for me personally, I grew up not really realizing these things subconsciously. And really, as I transitioned into more of my profession that I do now, and seeing these things show up in front of me with other people, or some of the side effects of this or the repercussions of it, and having to do some really deep work into myself to like heal my own patterns in myself so I could help others. I guess what I started noticing is like my restricted experience with emotions, like, for example, or not having access to those, or seeing how it's modeled all through society, even in film, where males resort to anger or violence instead of communicating and working things through. But if you do those things in real life, you have legal repercussions or could go to jail. It's like you just start shutting down and not having really an outlet for that. I started seeing in society a lot in my field, where you start understanding that the reason you see so much stuff propagated and, all through grade school and high school and junior high about, not showing feelings, don't be a baby, don't cry, all the things we hear all the time. And then you see it kind of modeled later on in life, where people go to resort to their man cave. I've seen it so many times, and I notice it in my own pattern, not to overshare personally, but when I have, when in the beginnings of some of my relationships, or I feel overwhelmed, it's like, I want to retreat, want to run away, want to go to my man cave or go to my own space. And a lot of that is when I started realizing that was a breakdown in communication. It was not being in touch with my emotions and just feeling overwhelmed or numbed out or shutting down. And now, being in the field I work in, I see this show up as a whole other slew of symptoms, like interpersonal relationship problems, people with low self-esteem or social anxiety, increased depression. Even for me personally, another big one was not asking for help as a male, because we have to have it all figured out on our own, and numbing our negative feelings. And then I've just seen an upkick in like addiction and other issues and people I help, and just the fourfold increase in suicide rates with males. It's huge. Well, I have a lot of tools at my disposal, just based on what I was trained in and in my professional school, but I'm very eclectic when it comes to working with people. Instead of just having one modality, it's like people get hurt in relationships, but paradoxically we heal in relationships. And it's the first one is creating that safe space. So one thing I start with people is just really working on just that emotional intelligence to start, and that can be as simple as just a lot of males I work with, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but because I was one of them for a long time too. It's like we either feel good or we feel bad. There's no like in between, and part of that is like really trying to get more of a nuanced language of like, how are we really feeling? What's really underneath it? Like even things, well, damn it, I don't know, I'm just frustrated. It's like, well, break that down. And it's that frustration, a combination of feeling helpless along with anger, and learning that some of the anger that we have coming up, it's a secondary emotion to me now. Like, what's underneath it? The anger makes us feel more powerful, makes us feel stronger, makes us feel protected, but what's really underneath it? And I guess why I bring up the relationship piece is starting to develop that therapeutic relationship so people feel safe to open into deeper levels, what's beyond these other feelings, and giving people just the space and courage to just stand in their own emotions. And that takes time to build. Trust me is something you earn, you don't demand. And that takes time to allow people to start opening, and then learning what's really underneath the emotions, seeing that gender-wise, we're really not that different. We all are human beings, and we have a full range of human emotions for a reason. We've just been modeled that some are okay, some are not, and some were never even explored at all or shut down. Realizing they're socialized this way, and they don't always have to be that way, and we can start to unlearn or kind of reparent some of these parts of ourselves.
My heart says this, that masculinity is a mask, and it's one that we put on a while ago, probably to survive, or at least that's what we told ourselves, but there's a shadow underneath it, and really only by taking it off do we see that it's really a role that we're playing, that we're actors playing at our own masculinity, which I guess is a relief, because it allows us to, when we access it from an animist standpoint, transform it from something that ruins and poisons us to something that supports and strengthens not just us, but people in the communities that we serve. So I think once you see, as an animist, that the sky is a person, when you hear the wind's voice, or you understand that there is an archetypal spirit of tree out there that exists beyond the existence of all physical trees. When you see that, it decontextualizes this perspective that you have to be in control or have power over everything. It allows you to see, in fact, your true place, which is part of a network or a web. And when you're part of a web, you want to be the strong part of the web to support all of those things in the web that you're connected to, that you love and care about. That's a really rambling way of, I guess, talking about what I mean by sidestepping the mask of society's concept of masculinity and moving on the inside of this idea that we can be many different things, and the things that we ought to be are the things that uplift and serve. And I think that's really, for a long time, been the role of should be the role of the masculine, is to uplift and serve, that our strength should be used to uplift and serve, if we have strength or power at all. Being masculine also means knowing that there's this inner girl, which is, I guess, the last part of it. That my wisdom, if I have any at all, or my sense of justice, doesn't come from my masculine. My masculine is almost weirdly all external, and so is empty. But there's this internal piece where my spirit comes from that I realize is also feminine. And it fills me. And that femininity is my love and my desire and my hope and my my ability to do logistics. It's the piece of me, I think, that I bring in a lot of subtle ways to my service as a teacher. And I think that it's allowed me to make sure that the kids who have already seen through the illusion of gender feel completely loved and supported and strengthened and uplifted and given every opportunity. I can use what power my masculinity brings me to at least do that. Thanks.
Hola everyone from sunny Mexico. I'm Parson Bob, known as Beto down here. I like to say I'm a parson person. Has a nice ring to it. My mentor Quynn has kindly asked me to contribute to this project. The suggested topic is positive masculinity, but I may veer off topic. For me, a more appropriate label would be divine masculinity or true masculinity, or possibly spiritual masculinity. For me, true masculinity will always be positive, with lots of feminine qualities, so the man is balanced, so the yin and yang is balanced. I believe a man comfortable in his masculinity will have many qualities usually attributed to a female, such as compassion and caring and nurturing, and he will not be afraid to show them. I'm not sure, but I think the left side of the brain is referred to as the masculine side. I will share that I struggle with this. For most of my earlier life, I had been left-brained to fix things, solve problems, build stuff. I used my right brain very little. Imagination was put aside. I had to be practical. Some of this was due to our culture and society. Now in my later years, I am definitely making slow progress to be more in balance. But I'll admit I have a long way to go. Progress, not perfection. An example of overusing my left side involves paintings of any kind. I can be looking at the most awe-inspiring work of art by a master, and I will be looking at the frame. Are the corner joints tight and uniform? Is the painting hanging level? Sometimes I think it's useless, but I keep trying to get out of the left side of my head and into the right side, or into my heart space. I'm sharing this to emphasize that I think a lot of us men need to be ready to let go of some of the stories we've been told, and not be afraid to tap into our feminine side that may be laying dormant and unused, so that we can shine our light in a positive masculine way. Our world so desperately needs more positive masculinity. So many problems the world faces arise from what men have been taught to think is manly. How fierce competition isn't ideal to be sought by a man. The beer commercials with the hot babes, the lies women are told, how they are supposed to look to be attractive to a man, the emphasis on physical appearance. And so many of us men buy into this false scenario. The more I walk down my spiritual path, the more I see the true male is so different from what society and culture would have us think. Quynn has asked me as an elder to finish with a few words of wisdom. I suppose we will have to wait a decade or two for real wisdom from me, but for now I will fake it for her sake. I will share what I think of as a guiding force in my own spiritual path. I have latched onto the prophecy of the eagle flies with condor. This prophecy comes from Peru. It is similar to other prophecies from all over the world. A very short explanation begins with looking at the eagle as representing masculinity and the concept of materialism and of building things. The eagle has been flying high in control for centuries. The condor represents femininity, spirituality, and has been asleep for centuries. The time has come for Pachamama to return to balance, for the eagle and the condor to fly together alongside each other in the sky. I believe the role of the spiritual male is to step aside and let the spiritual female lead us, and to provide protection to the female as she awakens to her power. Namaste. Thank you for this opportunity.
Good evening, family. I'd like to thank the creation for my life, to the silence and the stillness and the four elements that creates all things. My name is Raymond Alonso Baca, son to Eduviges Molinar de Baca and Raymond also Baca. I'd also like to thank the beautiful earth spirit Amalia Parra Baca, who has been my wife for the last 23 years and have been an inspiration to all the things that I've done. I would also like to thank Quynn of Web of Life Ministries for inviting me to speak on positive masculinity. My wife, our friend Dr. Katie Walsh, and myself own a holistic medical clinic in Mesa, Arizona called Inner Alchemy. My ministry is about gathering community and building stronger families. It's been a hard road for that, in my 50 years here on the planet. I mean, I've seen a lot of changes, It's like we went from being these really hard, rigid men to trying to really start to balance ourselves, to find some kind of balance in ourselves, and to be able to express the kind of feelings that we do have and try to be a little bit softer. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. There was this underlying hardness. Fear has really gripped us, really taken a hold of how we think and how we behave. It doesn't allow for love to flow. And that's been a problem for a lot of people, a lot of men have really taken this stance that they have to be some kind of way. And the real part of it is that we've chosen that. We've made a decision as a society, as a community, to reinforce those type of behaviors. And so then what we end up getting is like these type of people who aren't good for the community, who have these skewed ideas, and they don't allow for any other ideas to come in. It's been hard, I don't agree with all of the changes that have been taking place because things were so out of balance and one-sided. It's taken a little bit of time to come back, and now it's come back all the way to another side. And so then we're finding that there's no middle ground. I think that it's okay for people to be and act in any kind of way that they would like. But the underlying problem is that we have completely swung the pendulum to the other side. And so that's led to a lot of conflict within the community, within the society, because we don't have room for people to be who they want to be. Although I think that as men and as masculine entities, it's our job to be the protectors. It's our job to be the leaders of ideas, but not necessarily the leaders of the community. Long time ago, before society came, before there was civilization, there were men and women on the planet for millions of years. And they had to live in balance. They had to live in balance with the earth. The earth dictated how the seasons came, where we had to find shelter. And so you needed the balance, and balance was in everything that you've seen. I'm not saying that everything has to be masculine and feminine or man or woman, but I'm just saying that there needs to be a balance in each person, in each person's self. I think that there's been a deviation from that balance. And so then like the earth and the Animist people of the earth, who even the native people of the earth, they were all persecuted against, so that this type of idea, this kingship and this religious leaders could take a hold of the communities and mold them to their will. That's out of balance. And that's a lot of what's been going on. And as ministers, I think it's our job to find a balance for the people, not to tell them who they have to be, not to tell them how they have to be, but to try to like encourage them to find the balance within themselves. The creation planted a seed within your heart. There's the energy of Mother Earth, and there's the energy of Father Sky. And that expresses itself in our heart. So there's a seed that's been planted there so that the creation can have an expression through each person. It doesn't need to convince anyone of anything. Your place is expressing creation, expressing it so that it can have a human experience. So that's the way that I would express to people about positive masculinity. It's just a way to not be in charge, but to really work on the self and be the best self that one can be in order so that you can make room for everyone else. So thank you, family. That's all I have to say for you tonight. I hope that this lands on you in a good way, and may the Creator bless and shine on your life. May the 7 emissaries of divine light surround and protect each one of you and your families. Good night.